I got to play D&D with Aabria Iyengar. I know, flex. And during that game, she kept doing something none of my DMs had ever done.
You're only one away. I love to make a little bargain.
Saying I can have a bargain to get one more point on the die.
Oh, sure. Why don't you make me an offer, Alex? What will you give me for a 20?
I remember immediately thinking, wait, we can do that? I had never seen a DM openly negotiate the outcome of a roll with a player before, like a fae gunning for your firstborn, and it was exciting. So I immediately stole the idea. It seemed simple enough. I started offering bargains in my own games, and sometimes they created great moments, and sometimes they just kind of fell flat. I knew I must be missing something, so I did what any reasonable person would do. I watched hours and hours of Aabria's DMing, hunting for every bargain I could find. Eventually I realized it's not just about the bargain itself. What really makes this tactic work is the timing. If you offer a bargain at the right moment, it can get your players more invested and make your games more exciting. Even though Aabria is, of course, running games for audiences, I think this is one of those actual play tools that translates really well to home tables. So today I'm gonna show you how to spot those moments and what to do with them. All you have to do is give me a few minutes of your time. What do you say? Should we make a deal? At first I thought she was just putting her own flavor on an existing technique. There's an optional rule in the Dungeon Master's Guide called success at a cost, where if you fail a roll by just 1 or 2, the DM can take pity on you and let you succeed with a complication, like being knocked prone or disarmed. I've always really liked this rule because I think one of D&D's biggest weaknesses is its extremely black and white system for success and failure. It's disappointing to miss a roll by 1, especially because most of the time when you fail a roll, nothing actually happens. I thought she also might be pulling inspiration from Blades in the Dark because they have a mechanic called a Devil's Bargain, where you can add a bonus die to your roll if you accept a consequence from the GM or a fellow player, like doing unintended harm or sacrificing an item. I was like, okay, Aabria's using success at a cost. She's just flavoring it like she's an archfey trying to trap you into giving her the color of your eyes.
What will you give me for a 20?
When I go to move and grab them to run, it opens me up for a shot from one of the people that is there.
What part of Lividity does Lividity think Elias likes most? Because that's where I'm going to hit you.
I think Elias likes my smile.
I love you, and I love this game.
We'll cut before the wanna know how I got these scars moment. Hearing it the first time was enough. Anyway, this one makes perfect sense. Alex Ward, playing Lividity, misses by 1, and normally that's where it stops. Alex's turn is over, nothing happens, move on to whoever's next in initiative. But instead, Aabria interrupts the normal flow of the game here, and we get a dramatic rescue and a consequence that is both mechanical and narrative. At the time, I was like, awesome. Great way to invite the player into choosing their cost and make a failed roll a little more interesting. Clever trick, I will be stealing it. Except when I went back and watched this game afterwards, I realized that this wasn't the first deal Aabria had offered us. Just a few minutes earlier, this happened.
I could walk through turn by turn who they hit, how many people they kill, how many people Lividity would be able to protect. Because Lividity, you very specifically interposed yourself to protect them. I'll leave this one to you. You've already lost Irvina. You've lost Sharp. Between Lars, Elias, and Kevin.
No.
They can all survive, and we can keep playing this out. If you give me 1, we'll leave it to a die roll. If you give me 2 of them, I'll give you that die roll with advantage. If you let me kill all 3, I will spare the rest. And you all make it out, and we can exit combat.
I'm going to give you 2 of them.
It's a little less obvious, but this one is a bargain too. She's negotiating a deal. Give me an NPC's life, and I'll give you this in return. Did I say fae? This one feels a little more devilish. Nobody failed a roll here. In fact, this bargain doesn't really have anything to do with the dice. Instead, Aabria interrupts the typical flow of combat and basically asks, how much are these lives worth to you? You can save 1 or 2 or 3, but each one has a cost. Clearly, Aabria was using this concept of bargaining with players in a number of different ways, but I was having so much trouble figuring out when she decided to offer one. I was binging her games, hunting for evidence, and just hoping a pattern would appear. here. It's a tough job, rewatching all of A Court of Fey and Flowers for the third time, but I'm dedicated to the work. The more of these bargains I found, the less they seemed to have in common. Some happened after failed rolls, some happened when nobody was rolling at all. I even found one that happened after a successful roll. Some were deals between the DM and the player, and some were happening entirely in character. These bargains were all over the place, which made me think maybe I was going about this wrong. Instead of studying the bargains themselves, I started studying the moments around them. Let's make one more deal. You watch today's sponsor, which I have worked embarrassingly hard to create, and when we come back, I'll show you the pattern I think I finally found. My tabletop game was tomorrow, and I had everything I needed. A drink stiffer than a stone golem, a handful of my favorite dice, and my notebook, full of all the lore I needed to crack this session wide open. Wait, where's my notebook?
Talking to yourself again, detective? Wouldn't it be more fun to talk to me?
Winona World Anvil, the ultimate RPG toolkit used by over 3 million game masters. She was busier than a hasted cleric at a Manticore rodeo, but she still made time to visit me. Come to brag, Anvil? I know what you offer. Everything needed to build an immersive world for over 100 game systems, from timelines and interactive maps to character sheets and stat blocks. But how does that help me when all my lore has gone missing?
You wouldn't have this problem with me, detective. Everything on World Anvil is backed up to 8 different servers multiple times a day. Much more secure than a flimsy little lock on a desk drawer.
How would she know how flimsy my desk drawer lock is? Something fishy was going on here, and my gut was telling me it wasn't a Sahuagin attack.
You're stubborn, detective. But if you ever want to get smart instead, use the code Ginny for 51% off any annual membership. Don't worry, I'll see myself out.
The thief was obviously clever, careful, disciplined. There was only one explanation that made sense. Kobolds. Okay, time to fulfill my end of the bargain. What was the pattern? And to be clear, this is my interpretation. I have no idea what's actually going through Aabria's head when she runs games. For all I know, it's just nonstop evil laughter. She is a terrifying DM. But after watching a frankly unreasonable amount of footage, I think this lines up with the way she's using this tool. Every single one of these bargains happens when the story has built up a moment, but the game rules are about to release that tension instead of paying it off. I know that sounds kind of abstract, so let's look at an example. Remember that scene where Alex's character Lividity was trying to rescue some NPCs? There are rules that can resolve this. Aabria even says it. We could go turn by turn. We could measure movement and roll attacks and tally up damage. Eventually, we would answer the question of how many people Lividity can save. But by the time we reach that answer, it's probably been 10 or 15 minutes of arithmetic conducted by 2 of the people at the table while the other 3 start thinking about what they need to pick up from the grocery store. So instead of slowing the momentum of the scene, Aabria just jumps right to the most important part. How many people can she save, and what does it cost her? Not only does this maintain the urgency of the moment, but it also highlights something that would have been very easy to miss if we had played out the whole round. You can't save them all, and the more you try to, the bigger risk you're taking. Aabria's bargain makes this fact so much more visible than it would have been otherwise, which is great for the story. And terrible for my anxiety. The bargain isn't replacing the rules because the rules are bad, it's replacing the rules because in that moment, the rules aren't the most effective way to answer the question the story has us asking. I think of this as like a cousin to the rule of cool. We use the rule of cool when bending the rules would allow a really awesome moment that makes the player feel like a hero. And with these bargains, we're bending the rules to allow a really important moment that makes the player feel like their choices matter. The exact same thing is happening with these near misses. Mechanically, the answer is easy. The player rolled too low, the roll fails, end of story. And to be clear, I don't think that's a bad thing. Failure can be good for stories. It creates tension and it makes success feel meaningful. Without it, games would be incredibly boring. And in that Forgotten Realms game, I assure you, we all failed many times. Many times. I feel like most of what I did in that game is fail. But sometimes, Aabria decides that simply failing the roll might not be the most interesting or narratively satisfying outcome. Take this clip from a game with the Baldur's Gate 3 cast on stage at MagicCon. In this scene, Lae'zel was offered a single-use wish scroll in exchange for Astarian's fangs. He's obviously not happy that she's considering the deal, so he indulges in a little PvP and attacks her.
What's the roll? You have to beat an 18.
If it hits.
I have to 18. Come on, Papa. 13 plus 4 is a 17.
You feel yourself missing as your friend tenses up and takes a step backward. But the magic of this place is strong, And Muffin is no gnome. How badly do you want to get from 17 to 18?
Notice something interesting here. Even though this is mechanically the same kind of bargain, it isn't Aabria making it anymore. This bargain comes from Muffin, an NPC who's secretly an arch-hag. Even though the deal itself is meta, it's explicitly about the dice roll, the exchange is being woven into the story.
I don't want to hurt her. I just don't want her to take my fangs.
That's not what I asked.
So,
Do you want to attack your friend or not? You're gonna miss. The price then, dearest Aryan. I want you to give me a memory. The first time you remember being happy. Mine, forever. But you can make new memories.
I feel we really screwed this one up, folks.
In this scene, the failed roll still matters. If Astarion had succeeded, he could have made his point for free, but because he failed, making that same point now costs him one of his happiest memories. This is a much clearer indicator of how much this matters to Astarion. The guy's pretty attached to his fangs. I think this is why this technique works so well. If it was just about turning a failure into a success, that would lower the stakes of the scene. But these bargains actually raise the stakes by introducing consequences and asking players to choose. By deciding to give up a happy memory, Astarion tells us something about his character that dealing 1d8 damage never could. Aabria's bargain elevated the importance of that exchange and clearly showed us what Astarion cares about. But enough about Aabria. I could sing her praises all day, but you're here to learn how to use this technique at your own tables. So let's start with how to identify those perfect moments to play Deal or No Deal. Most of the time, D&D's rules do exactly what they're supposed to do. Somebody wants to climb a wall, we roll an athletics check. Somebody falls off of something, we roll fall damage. Somebody wants to hit a blue-haired YouTuber with a sword, I'd like to see him try. This is not about taking every excuse to ignore the rules. You definitely don't want to start undercutting the way the game works by offering bargains willy-nilly. These moments should be pretty rare. Aabria doesn't do this in every game, and even when they do show up, I never found more than 2 or 3 bargains at most in a single session, and I don't think that's an accident. Like so many tools in storytelling, these bargains work best when used sparingly. If every failed roll turns into a negotiation, pretty soon the negotiations become the norm, and you've lost the thing that made them exciting in the first place. At some point, your players stop reacting with, "Oh no, I missed," and start reacting with, "Okay, what's today's deal?" Which might be a good strategy for customer retention, but it's not much fun in a game. So how do you spot the right moments? I think a big part of it is gut feeling. I don't think Aabria has a little checklist she's running through in her head every time somebody picks up a d20. I think most DMs already have this instinct, it's just a matter of learning to recognize it. Have you ever had one of those moments where an important scene is unfolding and you know how the rules tell you to resolve it, but as you're about to say it, you can just feel that it's gonna drain all the energy out of the scene? Like the story was building to something and you can tell that you're about to cut it off. You're basically looking for any moment that feels like it's a significant story beat, or a narrative turning point, or even just something that could be a defining moment for a specific character. This might be a boss battle, or the conclusion of a quest, or even just an interaction that has to do with an important character relationship. When you spot a moment like this, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what question is the story asking right now? And do the rules as written answer that question? I was running a classic treasure hunt one-shot at GameCon Canada recently, and my players were facing off against the villain, an undead pirate queen defending her horde. Yes, a spooky evil lady, don't pretend you're surprised. As we neared the end of the combat, one of the player characters went down while in melee with the villain. Now, the warlock had a healing potion, but she was also too far away to reach the downed character. That's what we in the biz call the Eldritch Blast effect. So she asked if her familiar, a cute little flying squirrel named Archibald, who had quickly become the darling of the table, could deliver the potion and tip it into the character's mouth. Rules as written, this is questionable. Familiars can interact with objects, but giving a full potion bottle to a tiny creature that can't actually fly and expecting it to not just carry it, but maneuver it into an unconscious sailor's mouth is a pretty big ask. The standard answer is probably just no. Archibald can't do that. Then combat would continue as expected. The warlock would probably just take another Eldritch Blast or two, the downed character would roll their first death save, and they'd probably get healed next round. But as soon as she asked, I had that feeling we just talked about. Because this wasn't really a question about what a familiar can do, it was a question about whether this tiny little flying squirrel that the whole table had fallen in love with could pull off a heroic rescue, which to me felt like the perfect moment to put down the DMG for a second and make a deal. So let's talk about what's on on offer. When you first start doing this, you don't have to jump right to Archfey level bargains. You can get your feet wet with simple things, like I'll let you hit, but I get an attack of opportunity. Or you can make the jump, but you take some damage. Or you can do it if you give up a spell slot. These are classic success at a cost deals. They can turn a boring failure into an interesting decision, and they'll probably make that moment a little more memorable. But if you want to do what Aabria is doing, I think you have to stop asking what mechanical penalty could I tack onto this, and start asking a bigger question. What do we actually care about right now? What's the thing that's making the whole table pay attention? If this were a scene in a movie, what would the camera be focused on? None of those simple examples have anything to do with what the table is emotionally invested in. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not shedding a tear over a lost spell slot or a few hit points. They're just resource costs. If you want a scene people are still talking about after the session ends, you have to look further than game mechanics. In this case, a familiar's capabilities weren't actually the interesting part. The interesting part was that everybody at the table had collectively adopted this tiny flying squirrel and wanted it to save the day. So I said, okay, Archibald can absolutely try this, but if he does, he's gonna have to make a dexterity saving throw. If he succeeds, he pulls off this miraculous rescue and saves your friend's life. But if he fails, the Pirate Queen grabs him out of the air, he drops the potion, and he's grappled. The Warlock immediately said yes, because I mean, have you met a warlock? Archibald took off with the potion in his tiny little paws, everyone at the table cheering him on, and he failed. The Pirate Queen reached out and plucked him out of the air. The potion slipped from his grasp, splashed into the water, and was gone. Then, on her next turn, she pulled out her flintlock pistol, pressed it up against his furry little head, and pulled the trigger. Table-wide gasp. Which frankly was a little rude, considering there was also a dying player character lying 10 feet away whose collapse had been treated with no such fanfare. Now, logically, we all know familiars are disposable. The Warlock can summon him again tomorrow, but this ended up being one of the most memorable moments in the game, and it's because the bargain wasn't built on game mechanics, it was built on what the table cared about. So what if you don't know what the table cares about? Thankfully, if you don't have any bright ideas for bargains, you can take another page from Aabria's book and just let the player do it. In the very first clip I showed you, she asks Alex, what will you give me for a 20? Of course, Alex is an experienced improviser, and he didn't bat an eye at being asked to create his own consequence. He probably even liked it, he's a sicko that way. But players in your home game might be less comfortable doing this kind of thing on the fly. So I want to share a trick I learned from a horror RPG called Public Access. Before you make an important roll, the GM asks, what are you afraid will happen if you fail? I love that question, because even if most people don't have an immediate idea for a narratively compelling penalty, they probably do know what they're afraid of, and that's usually a great starting point for a bargain. Instead of asking, what's a fair punishment for failing this roll, you're asking, what would make this moment matter more? Sometimes the answer is losing hit points, or losing a memory, or losing a courageous little flying squirrel. The specifics don't matter nearly as much as whether or not the players are emotionally invested in it. Now, I know I've done my classic Ginny thing of taking something that seems simple and then dissecting it until it feels complicated. I have a rare talent. The thing about learning tactics from a master is that of course they're gonna make it look easy. There's a reason Aabria is up there DMing for Dimension 20 in Critical Role and the cast of Baldur's Gate 3. She is absolutely incredible at her job. And honestly, I don't think she's even thinking about this tactic as granularly as I am. I think she just has so much experience and skill that her instincts allow her to do this without necessarily articulating every single building block of this technique. She's doing a sick guitar solo, and I'm just transcribing the sheet music. So if this feels like a lot right now, I totally get it, but it really does just take practice. The first few games where I tried this, I don't think I really got it. The bargains often felt random, or the consequences I built in didn't feel like they mattered. I was just interrupting scenes to go, might I interest you in some emotional damage? No? Understandable, have a great day. But with a little repetition, it got easier to spot those openings and figure out what needed to go there. The big thing is, you don't need to be scared to try this out because it's something they have to opt into. If you offer a bad bargain, they can just say no. You lose nothing by trying it out and getting some first-hand experience with what players will say yes to. And trust me, they will surprise you. Personally, I've also found this tactic really freeing. Whatever consequence I come up with, my players don't have to suffer it if they don't think it's worth it. I'm willing to take big bigger swings because if I go too far, they'll just say no. You know, whenever somebody in fantasy makes a bargain with a devil or a fey creature, I'm always sitting there on the couch thinking, what kind of idiot would say yes to that? Well, apparently the kinds of idiots who play with me, because I offered up bargains maybe a half dozen times during my 2 sessions at GameCon Canada and didn't get a single no thank you. At first that really surprised me. Some of these were genuinely awful deals where the risks seriously outweighed the rewards, but I don't think my players were doing that kind of risk versus reward calculus when they made those decisions. I think they had just decided that their fear of consequences wasn't enough to outweigh their desire for agency. Giving my players the power to choose doesn't mean sparing them from consequences. In fact, it usually means more consequences. But that's why I think Aabria's bargains have stuck with me so much. They're not about giving players success. They're about giving players a choice at those crucial moments that shape the whole story. And for me, they're about continuing my training. Someday I'll attain Archfey status, and then it's over for you. And speaking of Fae, I have a new adventure book that I'm releasing at Gen Con this year called Trouble on the Fae Train, which is exactly what it sounds like. There's a train, it's Fae, and things are going poorly. It's called Truth in Advertising, baby. My booth, number 501, will be the very first place you can get the book before it's available online. This is actually my first time managing my own booth at Gen Con, and I am absolutely terrified. So please come see me and tell me I'm doing a good job and that it's gonna be okay. I'll also be playing live on stage for this year's Legend Society game, Elderflower Power, DM'd by Antonio from Pointy Hat. I will be joined by Jacob from XP to Level 3, and, can't believe I'm saying this, Felicia freaking Day. We're playing D&D together. What the f? Get tickets to see us on Saturday at 4 p.m. before they sell out. They're already 70% sold right now, and we haven't announced Felicia yet, so I have a feeling they're about to disappear. See my full schedule and grab tickets at ginny.diguiseppi.com/events.